Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Please give us a few minutes. We'll start. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Please give. So we have an interesting topic today, Pramath, and this is one of my I've always wanted to ask you a little bit about this. But before we begin, I just wanted to welcome everyone to the session today. And thank you so much. We are part of the Harappa School of Leadership, and we run an accelerated management program. We are currently recruiting for our 4th cohort. But this conversation is really about understanding the power of meaningful connections. And if you've seen the video that Pramath had up on his LinkedIn, which was really, this exciting series that he's done, which is the knock knock videos, he talks a little about it. And I thought it would be a great idea for us to understand what do connections really mean, and how does he really work on them, and why is it really important for all of us to develop connections? So Pramath, before we begin, I just wanted to do a short introduction. Pramath is the Dean of the Harappa School of Leadership. He's the chairperson for the Board of Trustees at Ashoka University and the founding Dean of ISB. He's also involved with many educational institutions, and this is really the online classes that we run at AMP are also something that he put together. So Pramath, before we begin, I just wanted to ask you, meaningful connections, what do they even mean? I mean, is there a difference between a connection and a meaningful connection, or is it the same thing really?
No, I think there are many connections that one obviously has in life. Not all of them are meaningful. And the idea of the connection being meaningful here is that there is something that you gain from that connection, and there's something that you give to that connection where the other person gains. And I think those are the connections that are stronger and more meaningful. There is a concept or a framework called strong ties and weak ties. And we all have many weak ties, but we have a few strong ties. And those strong ties give us some sort of advantage in terms of personal growth, professional growth, satisfaction, happiness, whatever you want to call it. And so the point is to build meaningful ties, to build meaningful relationships and connections in your life. And as you do that, and as you focus on doing that, or as you prioritize that as you go through life, those connections mushroom, and they become greater and greater over time. And then through those connections, you start to grow, to progress, to achieve. They naturally start helping you in whatever you do. So I think, I do think the meaningful connections, that there are meaningful connections that are very different from just connections, and they are quite significant, and they can really make a big, deep impact in one's life.
By the way, everyone who's joined us, we're very happy to take any questions that you have. It would be great if you put your questions in the Q&A box. At the end of the day, this is an interactive session. We do want to hear from you. So Pramath, how does one sort of decipher or understand as we go along in life, which connection is meaningful? And if you're finding that a particular connection is not meaningful, what do we do with it?
Well, as long as the connection is not harming you, you keep the connection. Sometimes connections become meaningful later in life, uh, or may not ever be meaningful. As long as the connection is not causing you some harm or some hurt, then it's good to just maintain those connections. And that's the idea of the sort of weak ties that you have. You keep the ties alive. Uh, but the first part of your question was, how would you know whether something is meaningful? I think you know when somewhere in the connection or in your interaction with that person, something happens which makes you feel that you gained something from that person that was meaningful, that you learned something, you had an aha moment, that person helped you when you needed help. They opened up a new opportunity for you. They helped you solve a problem. You were feeling a setback in life or a failure in what you were doing, and they picked you up, they lent you support, they helped you. So there's usually one person who does something for the other. You could be the person who chose to do something for somebody else, and that gets reciprocated, or the person shows gratitude, and they acknowledge that you did something meaningful for them. So at that point, you start to realize that, oh, something happened here that is more meaningful than just staying connected or wishing somebody on their birthdays or meeting them just for coffee and catching up, where you went beyond, you helped out or they helped you. And usually that has to do with people overcoming an obstacle or just becoming better or growing. And we are here talking about professional relationships, of course. So this would apply to personal as well. But if we keep to professional relationships, then somewhere in the work that you do, you benefited from the other person, and vice versa. And I think that's when you know that this has the potential to become even more meaningful and even more meaningful over time.
So interestingly, what you're saying is that a strong tie is not necessarily when someone does something for you, but it's also when you do something for someone, and that's where the connection or this thing becomes meaningful. It's never just a take process. It's also when you're giving.
Yes, and Adam Grant at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania has written a famous book called Give and Take. And he talks about the fact that you have to have in your professional life always a give and take relationship with others. It can't just be take, because then you become somebody who's seen as being selfish and not very generous, and somebody who's just always very transactional. They get all the benefit but don't really give anything back. So those are the takers, and nobody likes takers, actually. Then there are the givers, but the givers are constantly giving, and that can be really, that's great. It seems very virtuous to be a giver, but givers just get exhausted, they get drained, they are always doing, and givers may feel good while they're giving, but over a period of time they are not getting anything back, and that's also not good, because you grow, you find new things to do, new opportunities, new ideas when other people bring them to you. I've been always a beneficiary. I always say that other people saw in me what I could do, which I could never see. If I was not a taker, of other people gave, but I also took. So you have to know when to take. And so in that sense, one should be a taker as well. So he makes the argument, to your point, that you must be the right balance of giver and taker. It's not great to be just a taker, nor should you just assume that, oh, just being a giver is great, right? Because you're always doing something for others, you're always giving, and you're this nice, virtuous unselfish person who's doing good for the world and so on. And he's saying, no, I think that's another extreme. It sounds nice, but it really should be a balance of both.
I think we'll take our first question, and please do keep the questions coming. This is from Niladri. Wants to know, how do you make a weak tie a strong tie?
Yeah, so I talked about it a little bit. I think you don't actually make an effort to make a weak tie strong tie. You wait for an opportunity to present itself. I think my take on this is that sometimes we are too eager to convert a tie into a strong tie. And it borders on what young people today or people today call networking, right? So you go to somebody you know barely and you say, I become my mentor. Some people come to me and say, become my mentor. The idea is to convert what may be a weak tie, my acquaintance with them, into a stronger tie, which is a mentoring tie. These things can't be forced. They can't just happen. So I think the way you convert a weak tie to a strong tie is that you wait for the right opportunity, for the right timing, for the right context to either give something or ask for something, or grab an opportunity if somebody is offering you that, which is the take part, right? And that's when the weak tie will convert to a stronger tie, and then the next such opportunity and the next such opportunity. Forcing a weak tie to become a strong tie, I don't think is a good idea. And sometimes people are too eager to take a tie that they think can give them some benefit and try and force that into a strong tie. I wouldn't force the situation. I would let the tie be, stay in touch, keep in touch, and then a natural opportunity will present itself. Sometimes the length that you have a tie for can also just result in the opportunity for there to be a strong tie, right? You really need to get to know somebody over a period of time. So the length of time that you spend on a weak tie will also determine when you can convert it into a strong tie. Trying to do it too soon when you've just met the person or just gotten to know the person is also not a good idea, because people will think you're coming on too strong. The more I talk about it, it sounds like almost romancing somebody, right? You can't force people to fall in love, and you have to kind of create the right context, opportunity, and be patient about converting.
It also sounds like a lot of work.
It isn't actually. I think that it's for me, it's just about staying in touch with people and being helpful when they ask for help, right? Or if you think they can help you, asking the right way to say, listen, I was wondering if there's something you can do for me here, rather than being demanding about it. And you'll be surprised in the way you sometimes ask, most people are willing to give you some help.
So that's interesting. You use the word demanding. So what you're saying is, when you're creating meaningful ties, it's not about making a demand or having an expectation. It's giving somebody the bandwidth to be able to do something or not do something, and not taking offense from it. Is there something close to that?
Yes. So when I want help, I'm not shy. Sometimes I ask for help for others, and that's easier. You're not asking for yourself. Seema needs help, so do you think you can help her? And then you can always then see if that person helps. Then it turns out that you say, wow, this person did something because I asked for it, even if it was not for me. So I think, I think you shouldn't be afraid to ask. You shouldn't be afraid to give, but you do it in a way that doesn't seem like you are forcing yourself on somebody, or that you are being entitled or demanding. Oh, of course, Seema, why can't you ask her? Sometimes people ask like that, right? And it becomes awkward, often people tell me, can you write to this person? Can you set up a meeting for that person? And I'm like, well, that person doesn't like to meet people. He's my friend. But the truth is he doesn't like to meet people. And then people will say, nahi, nahi, sir, agar aap bolenge, to they will meet, right? And then you realize that you are now being forced into a situation because you're being forced to say no, and the person is not getting the message. And I think that doesn't lend itself to a very good give and take or a strong tie situation.
So do you necessarily have to be an extrovert or someone who's able to really develop good relationships with people or be social in nature to really sort of make use of meaningful connections or even to develop meaningful connections?
No, I don't think so. I think that's the impression people have. So the impression is that, I have to be extroverted, I have to be a networker, or I have to socialize, I have to go to the parties and make polite conversation with people and so on. And a lot of has been written about the power of introversion and, not that being an introvert is not necessarily bad. In fact, I am inherently an introvert as well. It doesn't seem like that because I do all these podcasts and webinars and I'm very involved in education but the truth is that you invite me to a get together or a party or to meet lots of people, I don't want to go. I usually don't go. At the same time, I think what my introversion allows me to do is that when there is an opportunity to interact with somebody, then my conversations are much deeper. So you may interact with fewer people as an introvert, but in those conversations, you at least force yourself, which is where you have to overcome your introversion, to have a slightly broader conversation and get to really know that person. Introverts, for example, don't like one-to-many meetings, but they like one-to-one meetings. In fact, they're very good at one-to-one meetings because when you are forced to be together with just one other person, you have to talk, you have to interact, you have to socialize. And it's not like introverts don't like to do that. It's just that they are uncomfortable doing that. So once you get over the initial hesitation, where in a meeting where you are forced to talk or you're forced to interact, once you start talking, actually, introverts make great conversationalists. Introverts are very empathetic. They listen very well. And for all those reasons, you can start developing ties. And then from there, you go on to developing stronger ties and meaningful connections. I also feel that life is such a long journey. I mean, just the elapsed time is so many years that there's a huge power of compounding here. Even if you were to develop one or two meaningful relationships every year, think about it, over a period of a lifetime, you develop many relationships, and you can't have more than that many relationships that are meaningful. Most of us would have a handful of meaningful ties, right? Or relationships. So it is not about the numbers, it's about the quality. And if you even if you are an introvert, if you can get close in that way with one or two people every year, every 2 years, one a year, it still adds up to a lot. The other thing that I like to do is that I try not to give up. I try not to lose the relationship. So you then, if you're introverted, you then are closer to few people. So then you, by definition, want to stay close with those people because you're not the person who's going to go out and reach out constantly to other people. So I think if you recognize yourself as an introvert, or if you see yourself as somebody who's not constantly out there, I think it's important to recognize that and to say, listen, it's okay if these are fewer people that I know, but then let me make sure that I stay in touch with these people, that I don't let go of these relationships.
Let's take a question. This is Mau Dasgupta wants to know, how do you manage connections which are made and then it becomes draining, as in those people have too many expectations, especially if you are the giver in the party?
Well, of course, that's exactly what I was saying, that, if you are only giving, then unfortunately you have to put some boundaries and some restraints and some limits on how much you will do that. But I think again, this is about just being able to say no sometimes, right? And how do you say no politely or push back or say that, listen, I can't do this or I won't be able to do this. I think there are polite ways to say no. Now, if even after that, people keep pushing you and insisting and demanding, then I think it's not worth maintaining that connection. Then I wouldn't manage such a connection. I would then try and avoid that connection or continuing with that connection. I don't think a connection that is draining is going to be meaningful, and a connection that is draining is worth your while. Now, sometimes we don't have a choice, right? You have a boss or a colleague or a friend who may be very demanding and I think over time you have to find a way to get out of it if you cannot get them to understand that you're not going to be able to sustain the giving constantly. And this happens to us. I think the other way to think about it is that I feel like you can't be completely balanced in giving and taking at every interval in your life. Sometimes it feels like you're only giving. Your family, your parents, your friends, people at work, everybody wants something and it feels draining. I think you just have to realize that there are going to be periods like that in your life where it will be that you are giving a lot. There'll be periods in life when you are down and out and you need to take from others. And it averages out over time. And that often happens in relationships with people also. Somebody may be genuinely needy at a point in time, and they are having too many expectations. And it's okay for them to have it because they need you or they need that help at that point in time. So I think it's important to keep in mind that one shouldn't measure everything in that instant. You should measure it over a period of time and see, is there enough give and take in the relationship over a period of time, rather than saying, oh, just because right now this person is really demanding, that they are like that always. Sometimes we also assume that oh, this person is like this only. They may just be needing your help for a length of time. That doesn't mean they're like that. So I think making that distinction is also important.
So to make these connections, how important is it to be regularly in touch? Is that a concept of, today we live in the world of social media, everything is happening in or virtual world. And do we really, is it really possible to develop close, warm relationships, which eventually become good connections?
I think so, Seema. I think this requires some effort. I mean, I keep very, very busy. And one of my challenges is that I have too many of these connections and I like to not say no when people reach out. Equally, I make an effort to stay in touch with a few people. I also find that because of social media, because of WhatsApp, because we are connected in so many ways, you no longer have to write a letter. In fact, you no longer have to make a phone call. And in some ways, it's sad because the connections become very abrupt and terse and so on. But equally, I find that it's easy to, what I do is when I think of somebody, I just drop them a message. We often don't do that, right? Because you randomly get up one morning and you think of somebody, or you're driving in a car and you think of somebody, or somebody says something and you think of somebody. So for me, it's as simple as just sending them a message. Hey, I haven't heard from you in a long time. I hope you're okay. How are you doing? Right. And I think
that the nurturing of a relationship, is that what you mean?
Yes, it is. It is. And you obviously don't do that with the whole world, right? So for example, I'm not great about sending people happy birthday, happy Holi, happy Diwali, happy New Year messages. I actually proactively rarely do that. So but I do make an effort to thank people individually. So even if people were to send me a message on a group, I always do a reply privately and I send them a message, because I think that's what building a true relationship is about. And so it does take time. It does take an effort. It must matter to you. If it doesn't matter to you, obviously we shouldn't be having this discussion. But I do think that it's important to make some time, and it's part of who you are. It shouldn't feel like a chore. If it feels like a chore, then obviously, it doesn't mean that much to you, and that's okay. No judgment there. But if you do think and care about relationships, then even if it's a few, and I think that, I'm just picking a number here. It could be 5, 10. It doesn't have to be 2 dozen. But at least with those 10 people, you are checking in on them, exchanging a message or two with them. And I think that's all you need to be doing. It doesn't need to go beyond that. Then you'll also find that once you establish that kind of link with somebody, even if you don't reach out to them or are not in touch with them for 6 months or 1 year, it's okay. Because they are strong ties, you can go back to them even if you have not been in touch for a long time. It feels like you can pick up from where you left off, because that foundation has already been established. People are still, there's enough trust that just because you didn't reach out to them over a period of time, people won't hold it against you.
So Pramath, there is a question here and I'll take that. But before that, I just wanted to understand, as someone who is part of many, many educational institutions, do you think when people come together for a purpose of, say, education, or come together for a common sort of this thing, the cohort or the batchmates or the people you study with, do you actually develop a relationship with everyone, or does each one of them have the potential to be a meaningful relationship? And in your experience, how does that work for people?
Well, there's something out there which says that you become like the 5 people you are closest to. There's some number like that. A lot of young students that I interact with tell me that everybody does get to, the potential for that kind of relationship in a cohort is 1 with 5 others, right? And there probably is something empirical to that. I don't know. I haven't seen the research, but I absolutely, Seema, I think one of the hallmarks of the programs that I have created over the years, and the accelerated management program is included, and you have witnessed that in our first 3 cohorts, that even though it is virtual and people meet up once in a while, there is a certain bond that develops, which is very close between people. And people really start to help each other out. In fact, an education program, I think, creates a safe space and a psychologically secure opportunity to really build significant and meaningful ties and meaningful connections. You can't do that with everyone, right? You can't expect to be like that with everybody in your class. But can you do that with 5 or 6 people, and will that stay for a long time? Absolutely. I have also seen, Seema, that people develop these weak ties during the class, but post-graduation, those weak ties can become strong ties because you now interact in a different setting. And look at Harappa recently, to be a little bit, to bring a bit of a humor into this. At Harappa recently, 2 of our ex-employees got married, right? And when I would argue that when they were at Harappa, they had a weak tie. But after leaving Harappa, they continued to be in touch. And when they both ended up in Bangalore, they started meeting, and then they fell in love and they are married. In fact, they are the only couple that we've had in Harappa in 4 years that have met and gotten married through Harappa. So I think it's the same thing. People do bond in classes, in cohorts, and I've seen that with every batch at ISB, YF, Vedika. Now I'm seeing it at AMP, and surprisingly, even online. And I think people help people across cohorts, within cohorts, and those relationships will become relationships for life, I'm pretty sure. That's one of the great things about these types of programs.
So there's a question from someone, I don't have a name here. They want to know if there's any instance that, about a connection that surprised you at any point, like a relationship you didn't expect it, to be successful, but it is today.
Yes, of course. I have many such relationships. Let me see which one I can pick. Yeah, I mean, I can give you a relationship that I have with, I just wrote a book and I profiled some people in that book. One of those people is Sia Sood. Sia used to, in fact, briefly work with us. I still remember when Sia first came to the Vedika Scholars Program in the first batch, and you could see it on her face that she was not happy about joining that program. And she was under a lot of pressure from her parents, or I don't know what, where she was being forced to do this. And then we've had so many scholars and we've had so many students. And then it so turned out that during the course of the program, we found that she was quite bright, but she was all ready to take the first job that she got. And in fact, Shresi was there with me during those days, and we were basically doing the placements for the first batch. We sat her down and we said, no, don't take this job because we think you have a better opportunity ahead of you. And honestly, she talked about that in the book as well when I interviewed her. Of course, we were doing it because we were supposed to help her, but we didn't have to go out of our way. As far as we were concerned, she'd got a job and it was okay for us to tick the box and say, chalo, one more placed. But we insisted that don't, you're selling yourself short. Don't do this. You can do better things. And look, after that, she went on and, became she joined McKinsey and so on. And I continued to work with her. What has been surprising for me is that she has become a big mentor in some ways to me, right? She's always looking out for me. She just had a baby 2 days ago, and I actually went to the hospital to visit her. And I normally wouldn't have done that for somebody who was in a... So I think has become a meaningful relationship. We don't even work together anymore, but when she needs something, she'll call me. She'll always check on me. If I say, listen, I'm not doing well or I need some help, she will always help out. So I think that is a lot of these relationships which I've developed with our students over time have generally been very surprising, because in the beginning, they are like any student. They are like anyone in the cohort. You don't know, you least expect that you will get into a meaningful relationship with one of the students of a large class. But it has happened multiple times to me, and that came up. That's in general something that is a positive surprise when it happens. You're on mute.
I have another question here. Says this person, I don't have the name, says they're a development professional, but don't see much growth in their career. Shall I switch my career into corporate? And if so, what are the changes that I will face?
Yeah, what are the challenges? I think I'm reading it.
Challenges, sorry.
Yeah. Well, of course, you can always switch, and you don't have to switch. If you're not seeing growth in your particular NGO or company or entity organization that you're in, you can look to go into another. It's not like there isn't growth in the development sector. But yes, if you feel like you want to make a switch, of course, you should make a switch. I think doing some program will help you make the switch better. And I don't mean to now be openly selling the accelerated management program, but a program like this is what helps you. And there are many other programs that you could look at. But doing a management program will prepare you better for the challenges. And yes, you will face challenges, and not in the least will be the challenge that a lot of people who go from the social sector to the for-profit corporate sector face, is just the sense of, it's a very different sense of purpose. The for-profit sector is all about making money at the end of the day. There's a lot of focus on revenues, profitability, growth, and it comes with a little bit of stress and pressure when things are not going well. I think in the social sector, those pressures are not there. There are pressures of outcome. There's pressure of impact. But then what keeps you going is your belief, the meaning that you get out of what you do. And you may not always find that in the corporate sector. You are lucky if you find that and be in the corporate sector. So that's going to be one big challenge. Of course, understanding business management from a business administration and corporate lens is going to be the other challenge, which I think I already mentioned. But equally, a lot of the skills are transferable, whether it's the skill of problem solving, whether it's the skill of getting things done, whether it's the skill of dealing with stakeholders, dealing with external benefactors, it's dealing with people. All of those skills are transferable. Communication skills, leadership skills, all those skills are still transferable in the corporate sector.
I think we're almost at time. We don't have any other question. But before you go, I'd like to ask you just three things that you think anybody and everybody can do to develop better connections going ahead.
So one I would say is stay in touch with the few people who you think have the potential to become strong ties over time. Make the extra effort, and don't do something perfunctory as happy birthday or happy new year, but reach out to them, chat with them, keep the connection alive. Okay. Don't become so much of a recluse or so distant that you don't at least stay in touch, right? The second is, listen, you have to be a giving person in general. You don't have to give every time and with everyone all the time. But know that you will have to be a bit generous. You will have to generally have a helpful attitude towards others. And I know that some people may not value it, and sometimes you'll feel hurt, but I do think that the best connections happen because you selflessly do something for the other person. And I'm not saying that you should become some big saint and constantly be a goody giving person, but I do think that just being there to help people leads to connections. And what would be the third thing? I think the third thing would be that test people and ask them for help. There's no better way to see if a connection can be a connection or if a connection can turn into a strong connection, where you just reach out. And sometimes we are ashamed of asking, sometimes, but there are lots of things one can ask for legitimately. It could be just asking for advice. You're not asking any favors. But I think that creates an intimacy that allows for a strong relationship to develop. So yeah, I'm basically mirroring what I said through the evening. Number one, stay in touch with a few people, reach out. And I see Niladri has asked a question saying, how to revive a connection which is lost. Well, precisely, if there's a connection that is lost, just reach out to them and see how they are doing and say, listen, we haven't been in touch for a long time. Can we meet up? Or I just thought of you and I thought I'd check in. Second, as I said, be willing to give, be willing to be helpful, be willing to commit to other people's success. And third, be willing to ask, be willing to take in a good, meaningful way without imposing on the other person. And I think all those three things will help you build connections in life.
And very quickly, Pramath, how important is the ability to develop or the ability to sort of hear the word no? And how important is that in keeping your connections alive?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to, like I said, I think you have to get used to the fact that there is going to be an occasional no, and there should be a no from you too sometimes, right? And as long as it's not personal, as long as it is genuine, and as long as people are doing it, saying no because they genuinely can't for some reason, equally, you have to sometimes say no. And it is true that you may sometimes not understand why the other person is doing it, and you get miffed, or you feel angry, or you feel like they're not being helpful. Equally, sometimes other people will feel that way about you. That will happen. You have to be a bit thick-skinned about it. All you can be is try and be genuine in your intent. And you don't doubt why people are saying no, not because they are unhelpful or they don't like you, but they genuinely can't. And I would just leave it at that. But yes, the no part is important. Thank you for bringing that up.
All right. So since we don't have any other questions, we'll wrap it up. But thank you so much. The cohort 4 for the Accelerated Management Program is recruiting right now. If you have any questions or you want to understand a little bit more about the program, please do reach out. Pramath, any parting words about the program? Anything specific that you feel stands out in this program?
Yeah, no, I would just like folks to, we didn't talk about the Accelerated Management Program, but it's a great program that we've been now running for. We are now recruiting for the 4th cohort. Please reach out if you are interested, find out more, but also if you know people who would be interested, please spread the word and certainly connect to us so that we can answer any questions or tell you more about the program. Thank you very much for joining this evening, and good night, everyone. Thank you, Seema.
Thank you, everyone.